everyone. It's such a great pleasure to introduce everyone to Dan, who is the CEO of the California Building Industry Association. Also online, I see is my good friend from Jeff Montejano, who is the Southern California Executive Director for the BIA, who helped bring Dan to come and speak to us. So thank you, Jeff. So Dan, who is the president and CEO of CBIA, so California Building Industry Association, oversees and manages all aspects of the association. He is a well-respected and recognized leader who is strongly committed to ensuring that the organization continues to be the leading voice of housing in California and efforts to ensure the American dream of home ownership is attainable for all Californians. He has a very impressive background. I'm really excited that he is a former state assembly fellow because I am a Senate fellow, so we have that kinship. He also served as president and CEO of the Personal Insurance Federation of California, as well as he served as deputy chief of staff and cabinet secretary for Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger. So welcome, Dan. I'm so happy to have you here and come in meet with all these electeds that you see. So if everybody could just sort of introduce yourself in the chat and let Dan and Jeff know who you are. Dan, maybe you want to take about 10 to 15 minutes to kind of just give us a statement about CBIA, what you do, and what you think, how we can work together really to deal with the housing issue here in California.
Peggy, are you hearing me okay, everybody?
Yes, we are.
Okay, great, thank you. Well, Peggy, thank you for this opportunity. Julie, thank you for your work with me this past week to bring this together. And to my colleague, Jeff Montejano, I look forward to seeing you tomorrow up here. We work well together. So I'll give you just an overview and I'll make some comments, but as you pointed out, Peggy, I'd really like this to be a dialogue. And, as we had in the preliminary conversations with you and Bill Brand and others, it's a great dialogue, and I'd like to see if we could duplicate that again. So just some high-level comments about where we are as a state and housing front. And I'll tell you our perspective on this, and I know because you mentioned Embarcadero, not everybody agrees with our perspective. We at CBI think we do have a housing crisis. We think it's primarily a supply problem. And we know that many people want to buy our product, like we were in 2005 and 6. Most of our projects have waiting lists and we use lottery systems. We were having people show up and camp out, and it's creating fist fights and other problems. And so now we move back to a lottery system where if you pre-qualify, your name goes into a computer hat and we draw them out and sell them accordingly. And so we are back to a supply problem here in California. Tremendous interest in our product. And that interest in our product of homes grew through the pandemic. And more people wanted to have a home, and more people wanted a single family detached home, just because for many reasons, screaming kids on a 7th floor balcony is not always the best place to be. And so that perspective has really come to full picture here in the last 24 months. The California Building Industry Association, as we noted, is the state association. So we deal with state policy. So work with the governor's office, many agencies that we engage with. We're the ones who work with locals on school facilities planning and school bond issues. And CBI's members build about 8.5 or 9 out of every 10 housing units built in the state. That includes rental, includes affordable, includes free housing, pure charity, market rate housing, and primarily our members build your first or your second home. We do have like a company like Toll Brothers that will build your dream home, but most of the homes that our members build, like the RKB to the Morrison, it's your first house or maybe your move-up house. And I mention that because that's the market we are most interested in, is making it attainable for people who want to buy our product and making it easier to get that accomplished. Just some other thoughts and just generally where we are. If I may, I'll just show you a screen share here. Let's see if I do this right. So if you can see this, okay, this is the housing productions in California. And this just kind of shows you, these are permits pulled. So this is what you allow for. So local governments approve our permits, as you know. In 2004, we were building roughly 212,000 homes a year through permit pulling. Here is the Great Recession in 2009, where we went down to 36,000. And then our estimate for last year, this won't really be trued up until all of you provide your data to CURB, but we're estimating, or they're estimating, approximately 116,000 permits pulled. So this is kind of when people say, what are the real numbers? These are the real numbers. We can't build a home unless you permit us to do so. And so, and I realize you just made some comments about HCD, and we quote them only because our numbers are higher, so we use theirs because they're more conservative. But we say roughly this number in 2004 and 2005 is what you need to build to keep up with demand, even with the decreasing demand of population. And during this last decade, between 2009 and 2019, we on average pulled about 85,000 permits, so about half of what we needed. And so we think that's really the supply issue that we're dealing with. A couple other things. What makes California unique? So we do represent home builders that build all across the country. And California does have a couple of unique dynamics. And that is, one, we are very heavily dependent upon fees to get our projects permitted. So most states, the average fee, if you cross the border north or east of us, fees range from 10 to 15,000 per unit. And in California, they range from about a low of 40,000 to a high of 230,000. And I won't get into the whole history of Prop 13. You all know that better than I do. But there are various reasons for that. But it is a factor that's unparalleled in the US. Even if you go to the more blue states in the Northeast side, or even up to Washington, they have fees, but they're just not as robust or as large. And the other thing, just kind of stepping right into the discussion here, it does take us longer to get through the California quagmire. I'm not pointing fingers primarily at this group. A lot of these are state-driven regulations. The most famous, of course, is CEQA, and that's an important one. But there are many, many other sets of regulations, some of which we partner with CSAC, the League, and rural counties on, that we collectively agree are going to add unnecessary costs like stormwater runoff issues or issues of waters in the state. So these are complex state regulations that add to the delay and cost of building that are state imposed. So what kind of makes us unique is we have more state regulations than any other state in the nation, and we have a greater dependency on fees to accomplish our building process. And I'm not saying that to castigate it, those are just our realities. And those, because of the fact that you do collect a decent amount of money in property tax, and most of that leaves your hands and goes elsewhere to the state. And so as a result of that, in order for locals to achieve their needs, there's more fees. But for us, we're the messengers of these delays and fees. We do have the highest price and cost to build in the country. So I'll just give you one last kind of comparative. So we build a lot of homes in Reno and Phoenix. The time period to build a home in Reno, from dirt to sale of the home, is roughly 24 months. And in Phoenix, it's about the same. It can be done a little bit quicker, about 21 months. In California, for master plan projects, that's a project in excess of 500 homes. Some of those projects take 20 to 25 years to go through the whole process. And that is just uniquely California. And even very robust, green, progressive states like Washington, we pretty much can build there in about 3 or 4 years. So when we look at the process, and I know I'm meddling here a little bit, but when we look at the process, that is what distinguishes us differently. Last statistic I'll give, it depends on who you talk to. The realtors have their stats and DOF has theirs and others, but we roughly say the average housing unit in California for ownership is about $750,000 to $800,000 in California. The national average is roughly $350,000. So Wall Street Journal reported on Friday. And so, we are a higher cost region, and that makes the ability of attainability of housing for purchase or for affordable housing. We build with assistance from you all through various incentive programs, tax credits, and other processes, just much, much more expensive than the rest of the country. Last thing I just want to kind of leave you with is there's many, many other regulations that could go on, but the one that's really causing us a lot of anxiety, and this is one that we do work with local governments on quite a bit, and Many of you take a different perspective on this issue. And it ranges from San Diego considering a $2 million per unit fee for this, or other regions like Fresno considering a $20,000 fee. But that's this concept of vehicle miles traveled. And so it's a bill from now Mayor Steinberg, then State Senator Steinberg, SB 743, that encouraged people, for home builders, to build closer to the urban core and to not build in suburbs or rural communities. And if you were to build in those suburbs or rural communities, you would be assessed a vehicle miles traveled fee. And that fee is encouraging people to look for urban infill projects. Urban infill projects, and you all know this, if you're in the urban areas, are the most controversial amongst citizens because you're changing the character of a neighborhood immediately. And if you're building up and the people next to you are not, it also draws a lot of negative impact, a lot of CEQA and a lot of complaints. But in the wisdom of Sacramento, the push has been to push for urban infill and to discourage suburban living and suburban building. I mention all that because the effect of this is going to be pretty profound, and you'll see it in the next 12 months. We're pretty much through the process of pre-VMT land. And now that we're having to deal with VMT on the land that wasn't put in place with you all before July 1st of 2020, it's going to be more and more complicated, more costly, more difficult to determine if we can build, does it make sense to build, and what is the cost to build. And so what that's going to do is either, if it's not figured out soon, what's going to happen in that process is the cost to build in the urban core is going to go up because there's going to be less competition from the suburban core. And if we don't get it completely right, it's going to decrease that number I showed you from 116,000 to probably 60 or 70,000. So we are working closely with the governor, working with a lot of your city planners, planning commissioners, and others to try to figure this out. And to your own defense, the state basically said, hey, locals, you figure this out. We'll give you some parameters to the Office of Planning and Research. But in the middle of COVID, when you had far more important things to do, like save people's lives, the vehicle miles traveled concept was being discussed and debated across the state. And that some cities just haven't got around to it. And others have got a lot of outside grants, like the city of Los Angeles got a grant of about $7 million to put their VMT together, but not all of you have been given that $7 million grant. And so a lot of cities are still trying to figure out how to implement vehicle miles traveled. And that's one of the regulations, again, pushed on you from the state. I see a pattern here, but we see that as having a really profound impact on the future of our ability to deliver products to consumers. That includes rental products, that includes affordable housing products, and that also includes market rate entry-level homes. So that's just kind of an overview of the state. I'll just wrap this up with the umbrella that I know a lot has changed in the last decade in local governments. I know because I've been listening, and Jeff's a good partner on this as well, that there is a lot of tension between the state and the locals. Our biggest frustration, we'll just lay it out, if this is my concluding comments, is the state has not really provided a lot of resources. Big numbers come out, 500 million, but when you look at the fact that 562 jurisdictions, that comes out to about 750,000 per each city to kind of deal with the needs of housing. And we would like to, and would be open to a dialogue about how do we reinstate in a way that works for you all and works for the state, some sort of redevelopment agency 2.0, tax increment financing. There's different terms for this, but what I see happening more and more is, like from your opening comments, I know some of you share this strongly, there's a great expectation that you'll come up as local leaders with the solution without necessarily the resources, the tools, or the groundwork to achieve that. And so that's where I see an opportunity for us to partner. We've been working behind the scenes with Cal Ford and some others on how could we recraft RDA 2.0. And I don't like to always say RDA because it has its own baggage, but a mechanism to give local governments more control over their monies they collect and use for addressing both affordable housing issues, but also infrastructure needs that could have both benefit for legally defined affordable housing as well as market rate housing at an entry level and a lower cost for lower income families. So with that, I will stop. Peggy, I'll turn it back to you or Julie, whoever's in charge here. And no question, can't be asked. If I can't answer today, I'll work to get back to Julie and Peggy with answers. If it's a really tough question, I'll punt to my colleague Jeff. But seriously, I'd love to have a dialogue here. And also, you don't even have to ask a question. You can just tell me. I have a comment with my staff. It's questions, comments, or snide remarks because we're into politics. So if you've got, like, hey, Dan, I just want to get this off my chest. You don't understand it. This is why we're frustrated with home builders or Sacramento, or here's something you probably don't even understand, but this is really what's happening. I see this as a chance for me to learn like we did last time with Peggy and Julie and Bill. And so please tell me what's going on, and I'm here to listen, learn, and answer questions when you feel them to me. So thanks, Julie. Thanks, Peggy. And back to you.
And I'm going to give it back to Peggy, but first I'm going to qualify what you said, because I know that my people here understand that our guests are treated in a respectful way. So we're not going to make snarky comments, and we're going to be respectful in chat. And so I just confident that I didn't even have to say that. All right, Peggy, go ahead.
Well, thank you so much, Dan, for that open, minded and willing to dialogue. I think the only way we can get past the housing crisis and really get behind this idea of one size fits all, top down approach that's been going on, that's really more punishing cities rather than working with cities to address the housing crisis. So I really appreciate your willingness to work with us. I think the real big question we've always had is, why is BIA supportive of a lot of these housing bills that, we have such great relationship, many of us, and I'll speak from your Belinda, great relationship with our builders, great developers that we worked with. Why is BIA willing or to support some of these bills that take away local control?
Yeah, great question, Peggy. So all this goes straight to the core. I'll say SB 9 for starters, because I think that just kind of crystallizes things. I don't say SB 10. I'll give you a quick analysis of that. I really see that as still dependent upon you all. In other words, the city has to approve SB 10 as we read it. So if you don't want SB 10, you just approve it. If you want it, you use it. But SB 9, I'd say is a good example, Peggy, of that. So here's a filter we use, and it sounds simplistic, but it is how we look at legislation. And we call them a concept of housing creators and housing killers. If a bill makes it easier and quicker and less costly to build housing of any type, we generally view that as a filter of support. So if something is, if there's a bill that says, hey, you don't have to take as much time to get through this process, or you can waive some of these different requirements, or you can only do the requirements once, like CEQA, you have to do it, but you have to do it 25 times. Then we view that as a housing creator. So SB 9, it's a very controversial bill. We did support it because it does make it easier to add housing units in various communities. Just so you understand, because of that filter, by the way, the filter goes in reverse. If something adds cost or complexity, we view it as a housing killer. And we don't put the word housing killer on everything because there's a lot of bills, there's 200 bills, right? 280 bills right now in housing. So we pick a handful that we think are really stopping the ability to achieve housing at a good price point. So those are our two filters. Just, on SB 9, I don't know of a single one of our builders that are going to use it. If you're looking at Lennar or KB or Taylor, we build the homes, we sell them, and we move on. We don't then say, hey, we're going to put a housing unit in your backyard. That's done by independent contractors, small builders, remodelers. So we don't build to build for SB 9. We build for single ownership and single unit. Even if it's a duplex or a fourplex, we build it that way intentionally. It's approved by you all, and you say yes or no to mixed use, yes or no to multifamily. And so our, when we look at it, we support it because it does make it easier to add units in the community. But it's not, the members of CBIA are not going to be coming into your communities. You're not going to see KV homes building ADUs in the backyards of your residents. It's just not what we do. But if it does make it easier to build those, our filter is that we would say it's a good bill. Realizing, as Jeff's educating me, there are relational dynamics now with our local leaders that we need to be more mindful of on the state level. That may be a overly simplistic filter, but that has been the filter we have used, just because most of the bills we deal with, 95% add cost, add complexity, or add delay. So whenever somebody wants to make it a little bit easier, for us, that's a very unique situation. So we look for those bills as an opportunity to support them. But we know that we cannot build a home without local support. It is the most important, crucial concept we've been doing since the 1870s or 80s, and most cities were incorporated in this state. And so we're not looking to create undue tension. And again, SB 9 is not something that CBIA members are going to be using, because we build homes and we don't build another home after we built it. That's somebody else's process and system. So that's our filter, Peggy. And as Jeff has told me, that filter may be something we have to refine, because we're not looking to pick a fight with local governments, because we cannot build homes without local government support, period, end of story. That's it.
Yeah, and I think that would be what we ask of you is maybe re-examine that filter, because it really creates probably unnecessary divisive and animosity between us when we really should be working together. And we have hands up, so I want to go to the questions right away. We got a lot of people wanting to talk to you. So Steve Scharf, start with you.
Hi, yeah, I won't be snarky. I'll try not to be snarky. First, let me say we don't like VMT either, and it's especially ridiculous considering the increase in electric vehicles and the increase in remote working. And as I was at the Planning Commissioner Academy this past week in San Ramon, there's another $2 billion bill on the table to fund housing. Now, Governor Newsom vetoed this the last time it came to his desk, and we don't know what's happening this time. We had our California League of Cities, Jason Ryan, I don't remember his title, but he's like the legislative, he does the analysis of bills. So we had a whole session on SB 9, and it was basically, don't worry about it. Only 5.5% of single family homes would be eligible, and it'd have to be someone who paid off their mortgage and has all the financial resources. The downside of SB 9, I think, as we see it, is there's nothing in there that promotes affordable housing, and it will actually drive up the cost of single family homes, because institutional investors will outbid families for homes that do go on the market. And that's, I think, a big problem with SB 9 and SB 10. There's nothing affordable in there. And you mentioned impact fees. There's 3 bills coming with impact fees. All of them are terrible for cities. One would eliminate impact fees on density bonus units. These are market rate density bonus units, not, well, there are no affordable units in density bonus. So this is a terrible bill from Mark Berman. Terrible for cities, probably good for you guys. And then there's another one to defer impact fees over 20 years, and another bill to require that impact fees have to be spent within 5 years of being assessed. And I also say that the Cal Cities person said cities need to consider increasing their impact fees to the maximum legal amount that the Nexus study shows, because to compensate for what may be taken away by these bills. So I know you said impact fees are way too high. For cities, they're not high enough. I don't know of any city that's charging what their Nexus study shows is justifiable. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. And just a few comments there, and I'm more here to listen than that. I will take a look at those 3 bills you mentioned. SB 9 continues to create questions, and so as we work together, I would welcome how you're seeing it. We don't see this as the place that there are places where large corporate interests will step in and buy, especially after 2008, and most of the stock was bought out by BlackRock and those groups. So I'm familiar with what you're saying. We just, at this point, we haven't seen it that way because of the 3-year ownership requirement. I know there are people who now are finding ways to get around it. And so that, I think, because there's even symposiums on how to avoid some of those requirements. So I do think that's something that, it's just worth watching. Again, none of our members are going to come in and buy those neighborhoods. We don't buy neighborhoods. That's more venture capital, not home builders. We build neighborhoods, maintain them, and if there's HOAs, we set them up, and then eventually we step out and the community runs them. So that's good for me to know on SB9, because that's certainly not the.
Oh, can I interrupt
understanding
you
of it.
for 1 second? Because there is no requirement for owner occupancy. It's the person has to say that they intend to occupy it, but there is no owner occupancy requirement at all.
Okay.
And that was pointed out by our legislative analyst.
Right. And what it is also, you just have to sign it under declaration of perjury that you intend to occupy. But, most district attorneys are too busy charging serious felony crimes rather than charging a felony perjury, which, probably gets settled at the minute it's filed. So it's really not a big deal. I think a lot of them, it's Tony Atkins tried to make us feel better about investors, but really it doesn't do anything. Plus, who's going to enforce it? Am I going to go to Lisa's house and say, hey, Lisa, are you living there? Or, she's not there. Okay, I'm going to, be the enforcement police. I think that is really what's going to be the problem with this bill, that it really didn't figure things out.
Yeah. I intend to go on a diet too.
Okay. But Dan, I think one of the things that, about the impact fee that really hurts city is the fact that we can't recover a lot of those costs, right? And so as the state has more mandate, so you have to do more, or the city has to charge you more. But if we're told, hey, look, you can't do it, somebody's got to do it. And so then the cities have to make that tough choice of, do we take it out of our general fund to make up that difference? But if we do, then guess what? The roads are not going to get paved. Public safety concerns, parks, cities are now asked to take care of the homeless issues. Okay, now we got the homeless issue. So I think that's something that CBIA and its member might want to say, look, do we want to fight this hard with the cities? Or maybe we need to figure out how we can really work together to ensure that cities don't necessarily become bankrupt too, because if it becomes bankrupt, it's going to make it harder for people to purchase homes, because we'll put everything on the property taxes. So next up, Michael Barnes. Michael, I think you're muted still. There you go.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
First of all, Dan and Jeff, thanks so much for coming. I have about 10 questions I've already thought of. I hope maybe I want to ask all 10 right now.
Okay, just one.
Just one. Here it is. The RENA requirements. Well, first of all, let me back up. As you pointed out, in the state now, we're building about 100,000 units a year. And under the RENA requirements, it says that statewide, over the next every year in the next 8 years, we're going to build somewhere between 250,000 and 300,000 housing units a year. And my position has always been, that's not going to happen. It's just an impossible goal, and we're being set up to fail. And my question is, if you agree with me on this point, would you be willing to go to bat in Sacramento and say, hey, it doesn't make either the builders look good or the cities look good if you give us impossible targets, which we know we can't reach?
Yeah, we can definitely work with you on RENA. When we know for, just what you said, for a fact, looking at the last business cycle 6, I get confused, 6 or 7. So, it just hasn't happened. It's kind of a nice aspirational goal that hasn't really been achieved. We have achieved 300,000 homes in 1963 a year, and then again in 85. But our average, as you actually figured out, Michael, is roughly 102,000. So I do think, it would be good to have that discussion with Gustavo at HCD and just say, what are the practical terms? What are the realistic terms? And how do we achieve those? I also think it's important, going kind of back to Stephen's original comment on the fee side, I get the idea that you have to run your city in the black, otherwise you're going to be bankrupt. As Peggy was just saying. So on the fee issue for us, it's not so much. I mean, it's just a reality. We don't pay fees like this anywhere else in the planet. But there's so little money that stays with the cities. And the state has $50 billion in surplus. How much of that's coming back to the cities or counties? With all these realignments, another one thing. I mean, all these obligations you have. So it's like unfunded state mandates and issues. So where we can partner with you, and then Michael, this would help on the arena side too, because I know when I talk to local elected officials, like, Dan, I like to build houses, but it doesn't pencil out for me. Every house I add, I lose money. And, and sometimes we argue over that with our county people, but I understand the idea of mixed use. You need some sales tax, you need something to create the financing moving forward. And even if we gave you legitimate RENA numbers that are more achievable, if you still have no real economic incentive to make housing a priority from a fiscal management perspective, it just makes it harder for you to achieve whatever the number is. So, I mean, that's where we have had these conversations with the governor's office to say, if you really want housing, give the cities the resources to say yes. So that we say we want to build 1,000 homes, you're like, great, because when you do that, I'm going to get $50,000 a unit in offsets and fees from the state, and I can afford to do this. Versus, I really have no idea how I'm going to add the police, the fire, and we'll build the fire station, police station, but you got to pay them. And are there adequate property tax collections that you keep that help you to finance that? So I think too, on the arena side, there are challenges. And there are cities, let's be direct, we know this, there are cities that just don't want us to build anymore in those communities. So in that context, arena becomes laughable because the cities will pick sites that are not available. They pick cemeteries. I mean, come on, that's not serious. And then there are serious cities that are saying, yeah, if it can pencil out for me, here's where I can allow for 3 or 4 or 5,000 or 8,000 in Ontario. It's given a lot of opportunities there. So some cities are more open to it. I mean, to me, it's also the cities that have the resources, the wherewithal, the capacity to do it. And I also know, looking at it now that I've learned some things, arena numbers can be picked on. Like, hey, I don't want my community. Let's stick it over in their community. And so all of a sudden, you're like, I have 32,000 homes. I have to build like a 75-story building to accomplish that. So there are some just disconnects that have no basis in reality. I think where we can be helpful, Michael, is to sit down with HCD and say, so where are the buildable places? Where are the cities and communities who want to build? And then what can we as builders partner with the state to give the locals the resources then to build? I mean, I don't want to force building down a city's throats. That's just not productive. One, you can delay it for 20 years if you want. So I'd rather go with, hey, you give us the resources and you give us the wherewithal to do it. We want to do it. We could use some new parks, we could use some new facilities, and we could use some new housing of all types, some rental, some single family attached, single family attached. And if you can give us the resources to do it, it'd be very easier. I think it's easy, but easier for the cities to get to yes. And Michael, that's what we'd like to do, because this just becomes a numbers game and a gotcha game without any progress. And that's where we've been for quite some time. So yes, to your question, glad to sit down with Gustavo and sit down with his team. He's the head of HCB, and just say, hey, what can we do to find a way to yes to the communities who are open to building? And then what can the state do to alleviate the unnecessary costs? Because without that addressing, then you have to rely on fees, and we have to increase fees because costs are going up. And that just means the cost of housing goes up. So yes, Michael, glad to have that conversation. I don't know if there's a representative group that wants to sit down with HCD on that, but we'd be glad to join you with that conversation and see if we can create a path that's more rational, more realistic, and achievable in places where local leaders say, yes, I would like to have this built in my community, and I'd like to partner with the state and the building community to get it done. Then that would be really successful.
Well, I thank you, Dan. I think members of CALE would definitely want to join you. And I think I can say safely say that HCD will return your phone call, then return mine or Julie's phone call. So probably need your help to help set that up. And I think it's important that we partner up together. I mean, one of the things that SCAG had asked was $5 billion in the, no joke, every time we talk about housing, you can hear my dog bark. SCAG asked for $5 billion for infill projects, right, to help cities build infill projects. And instead, the governor only offered, I believe 500 million, right? And so I think this is somewhere where CBIA can really step in and say, look, if you're serious, governor, then how about giving them $5 billion for these infill projects? Why are you skimping on, 500 million split over 2 years? I mean, that's not going to be able to build anything in Julie's city, let alone the entire state. The other thing is, I think another place where I think we can really partner up is this idea of RENA enforcement, right? If you've been listening to what I'm going to try to get this close to me, is like the Attorney General's office, who want to punish cities for not building, but we can't build. We're going to have trouble building. We're going to have trouble meeting these RENA numbers. Yeah, he already tweeted out he's going to punish us. I think that's something that not just working with HCD, but also really working with the Attorney General's office. So I'm going to turn over to Mark right now, Verville, and try to calm down my dog.
Thank you, Peggy. Thank you, Dan, for a very concise discussion. I'm Mark Verville. I'm with the United Neighbors. Just 3 questions on your opening comments. You said there's waiting lists and you've got lotteries. What are the price points for your entry level houses, and where are they located? Are these detached, single? I mean, where is the demand? I understand it may be supply, but of course, all demand is always, value driven. So if you can give us a little bit better picture of what that looks like and where the locations of these projects are, and is the state giving you problems with, let's say, larger developments if they are starter family homes? And the last part of that would be, do you have visibility as to the institutional activity buying these brand new, if they are starter family homes? Is there visibility into what that may look like?
Yeah, so we are building all over the state, but primarily, you can look at the regions that are open to us building more. So Stockton, Lathrop, look in Sacramento, greater Sacramento area, look in the Central Valley, be closer to Fresno, look in Southern California, a ton going down Riverside, San Bernardino, Ontario, San Diego, next to nothing. So it kind of depends on those communities. Those are single family and multifamily for purchase market rate housing units. Price point right now, it depends on the home, but roughly $730 to $880. We do have some that are higher than that in the East Bay Area just because it costs so much to build there. And much lower than that in parts of San Bernardino. The outskirts, we can get down to $410, $430. As far as the state assisting, no, VMT does not assist in most of the communities I mentioned because those tend to be commuter communities. And their view is that we should do more urban infill, which we do try to do urban infill. During COVID, there was little to no demand for it. And the lottery system came out during COVID just because a lot of people did want single family detached. To your other question, most of what we're selling is, well, almost all of what we're selling is to individual parties with individual loans from individual people. So if you look at it, it's Wells Fargo, US Bank providing a loan to Mr. and Mrs. Smith or Ms. Smith, or so we're not selling our product to institutions. So the only thing that would differ in that would be rental units that we build and sell would be institutional, but those cost, $45 to $60 million, and that's not most people can afford that. So single family detached is almost overwhelmingly high 90% individual consumers, and they're individually qualified. So that's the area you'll see more institutionalized would be, well, a ton after the Great Recession. In other spaces, you will see some of that in the flipping side of things. You saw that with Zillow, they backed out of that market. That's on resale, not on new homes. So I think I got your 4 questions, but if I missed anything, Mark, anything I didn't answer?
No, I think that was helpful. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And we have Mayor Huebner from Solano Beach.
Yes, hi, thank you. Thank you so much, Dan. This is really interesting to hear. One of the things that I found quite fascinating was your how much money that you are being charged in fees by the state. Because one of the things that we as cities hear a lot is that, oh, the fees are killing us, the fees are killing us. And it seems to be directed at the cities, but we still have to do user fee studies and justify our fees. So I've always been kind of confused about, how would we be able to, lower our fees? So what percentage of your fees are state versus city fees? If you can give me a ballpark of that.
Yeah, so the city fees are pretty straightforward in that, depending on the city, the community, state where your fees are, and we pay those to get the permits. The state on VMT works similarly to how it would be on the local level, where they'll assess, the state in conjunction with the local governments determine those fees. And this is kind of a food fight that is yet to be determined. Right now, those fees sort of go to the local governments that assess them, although there's talks now about some regionalization of those VMT fees to try, it's hard to do transit city by city. So that fee at this point, though, is still going into a local jurisdiction. That fee is probably the most similar to a fee related to, similar impact fee, development impact fee. The other fees that I touched on, waters of the state, stormwater general permit, the cost of those is two different ways. So waters of the state, might only cost a couple $1 million in fees, I say only, for a large project. Where you run into problems is if you don't handle things properly, then the state can fine you. So we see, I probably should use the word fees and fines. That's for waters of the state and stormwater. So stormwater runoff is when and this applies to cities and counties, by the way. This is why we're all on the same side of this, with the cities and CSAP. When a city or a Caltrans or a home builder touches a piece of dirt more than an acre in size and agitates it, shouldn't rain in any water runoff, and God knows it will rain. But if it does, if we don't properly manage the runoff, then the fines and penalties are astronomical, far in excess of any profit we make. And so that's the other side of it. There is a cost associated with that. It's not paid to a city or the state. It's just, I guess I should say, the cost of doing business would be a better term than fees. We have to hire the biologists, the scientists, the systems to manage the runoff, to repair the soil, bring that in. So it's, I guess you call it the cost of doing business. So cities is much more direct. You get your list and you pay them. And with the state, it can be, in order to use this piece of land, city says you can use for housing, you have to make the following changes to reconfigure the land for runoff, for stream beds that may have never existed. I'm not kidding. And dealing with species, so fish and game, so fish and wildlife, as it's called. We will have to go ahead and do biological surveys and species. It's, we'll pay a fee to have, we'll pay for the cost of the state, but then we'll pay millions of dollars in scientists and experts. So cost of doing business, it's a little different than the local government's, Mayor, but it's a similar bottom line impact. And that's how, the two combined. The cities still generally cost more depending on the city. No, cities are alike. The state costs more time and more delay and more impact and more experts. So you got two different cost factors. And again, I'll just lay this out. And I know you need to charge these, but we don't pay these the way the governments are configured in other states. California is uniquely fee dependent on the local level for developer impact fees. And then the cost of doing business is uniquely different in California as compared to every other state. And even those that are very environmentally friendly, like Washington and the New England states, when I work with my counterparts there, their cost of doing business is radically less than California. So those are the two differences. So you're right, the discussion is more on local fees, and I should say it's more on state costs and expenses.
That's very interesting. Thank you. Just a real quick comment. When you, speaking of your filter, I know you were not opposed to SB9, but one of the ideas that people are expressing to me about SB9 is that it's pushing undesired density onto neighborhoods, and that sort of anger and negativity then bleeds out into all other projects that come before their neighborhood or their community. And I think that sort of general attitude souring might be something that you might consider also. SB 9, just, it's destroying so much of our community and making such a mess of infrastructure, et cetera. And I think that the other unintended consequences are that people just start to become anti-development that were otherwise maybe for more development.
Yeah, it's a really good point. And Jeff Monahano has been really candid with me on just understanding that as well. And just like, hey, as locals try to confront and deal with SB 9, make sure we on the state level fully understand that. So, and that's something too, I will continue to work with you on. I mean, in Sacramento, pre-SB 9, I think they put 36 ADU permits out of like 80,000 homes. So I don't know, but if this is changing, if these numbers, you know so better than we would, how many a city of in your city you're getting thousands a month, or I mean, how big is this? We just don't have those numbers from where we sit. So it would be good to, I can understand if a neighborhood gets changed overnight, you're right, Mayor, that the people aren't going to be wanting more.
Thank you. Thanks again for joining us too. And we look forward to working with you.
Thank you.
I think there's a lot of opportunity for, CBIA and CALE to really work together on a lot of these issues. Something that just came to mind that what the CEO of Olson built development had done to prevent investors from buying the homes is they had addressed SCAG was he basically would not sell to any investors, and if they do buy it and they try to sell it, he will make his homes cheaper so that the investor will guarantee to lose money. Do you think that's something that your members would be very interested? I know Olson Property Company is not part of BIA. Is that something you think that your members would be interested in help drive out some of these investors and really let home buyers, homeowners buy these homes?
Yeah, I mean, I'll double check with our membership. I don't know of anybody who's selling to anything but private parties for these are new homes. Now, resale is different. We don't do resale, it's the realtors, but I'll ask our members. I mean, I don't think it's an issue because we don't sell to them. But let me just say it, as you looked at this, are you able to verify this is not some sort of holding company or some sort of investment group? How do you know? But again, what we do is most of our builders have their own mortgage companies. And so, or they have a direct relationship with a major financial institution. So they have a really great understanding of who they're selling to, and drawing up the documents and everything. So and I'll check on that because I'd be curious to see like, hey, is anybody, and I know for a while there was a lot of foreign money coming into California that's since stopped. But even that, when the Chinese were buying our homes, they're buying very nice homes, very high-end homes. Most of the Toll Brothers homes were doing some of the Chinese, but those were individual families. We did track that down. I was the president of Premier of China, who Mr. Trump and him got in a fight like over a weekend that stopped for us. But as we looked at that, because we started to look into it, there was people trying to pull family money out of China, and it was family-owned properties. Because when we went to sell them, there was no government, there was no private institutions, it was individuals. So far, I mean, I'll check, but I don't know of any of our new homes that we're selling to anybody other than individuals. And the only dynamic we have is what is an investor? If an investor is Peggy wants to buy a home and remodel it because she's got a great eye for design and sell it, is that a bad thing? There's a bill that says it is. Mr. Ward has a bill from San Diego says that house flipping is a bad thing. And if it's house flipping, if it's Peggy by herself and she's really good at it, is that bad? If it's, Dunmoyer Enterprises worth $25 billion, maybe it is. And that's what we're trying to stop. So we have to be careful how we do that because an investor isn't necessarily a bad person. If it's like their business, as in a family that remodels homes and takes crappy homes and turns them around and makes them really nice ones, the property values go up. It's not necessarily a bad thing. So we're trying to find that rifle shot of how do you protect against corporate interests who just wipe out competitiveness and making sure that if somebody actually is in the business of remodeling homes that have fallen apart, that they're not put out of business. We don't think they're bad necessarily. So it's finding that sweet spot that we haven't figured it out yet. But I'll ask our members if there's any way we have a sense of corporate interests versus individual buyers.
Great, well, thank you. And I'm going to have Anita ask the next question.
And before we move forward, we now have 3 hands up and we've only got 5 minutes left. So no new hands up. We're gonna close right after Michael. Oh, I guess that's 2 hands. Stevens wasn't actually up. Okay, so Peggy, thank you. And go ahead, Anita.
Thank you, Mr. Dunmoyer, for being here and for the enlightening information about what your organization and your members are doing. I think we do have an opportunity to collaborate. And thank you for the graph that you showed, because it leads me to something I've heard, but I'd like to hear your observation about it. And it may be an area where we can be helpful too, is after the 2008 crash, and the fact that we've never recovered in terms of the number of houses that we're building per year. I've heard partly that is attributable to a loss of skilled laborers available to do that. Can you comment on that? And is that something where we might be able to collaborate or be helpful to you?
Yeah, you're totally right. Thank you for asking a great question. We get on to the macroeconomic side of it. There's the human factor side, the human factor, the families who want to live in a nice place and call home, but also the human factor, what goes into building a home. And that is the labor component. So you're correct. So what happened quickly in 2008, obviously a lot of people who are building their homes, there were no homes to build, so they had to find other careers, and they moved out of the construction and trades, building trades, into other industries, and never came back. And so, as you can tell, lack of supply of labor results in higher costs to build, and fewer people who are able to build. We have seen the aging of our trades. The average age is about 49, and it should be probably 35 average. You should be younger to do what you do. If you're doing cement, my dad did cement and Hemet until he was 80, but in Superman, most people need to start going to managing and superintending by the time you're 40. What we're trying to do to address it, because this is really the key thing, and we'd love to partner with you on this in your local school districts. We have a group called the BIDA, the Building Industry and Technology Academy, that reaches into high schools and introduces young men and women. And again, I say women here specifically because we want more women in our industry, both building with a hammer and also running the companies. But this is an area we have about 50 schools now that are partnering with BIDA, this program, a nonprofit, 501c3, fully recognized by the UC as acceptable elective credit, and can introduce you into becoming a framer or becoming an architect. It doesn't matter because you can qualify to get into UC Cal Poly. It's got a great architectural program. Same thing, building program at Chico State, and all of our major universities have architectural design schools. So we do want to see a growing trade field. You can make a fortune as a skilled tradesperson. And people are like, well, I want we all have this, and I did this. My wife and I say, you got to go to college, you got to go to college. No, kids are wired for college, and a good electrician can make a double 600,000 people. If you're running a crew, you can make millions. And so we kind of have this thing like, well, I'm a laborer, that doesn't make me as good as someone who went to college. It can make you far better. It can give you a lot of creativity, and your projects and issues you do last for centuries. So I mean, it just, it's okay to build the homes that last for centuries. And we just need to make it, again, if somebody that's never did well in the book learning experience in high school, I doubt they'll do well in a book learning experience in college, but they may be a really gifted tradesperson. So we're trying to build that side of the industry back up, and it's a definitely area of great need. And you know that too, when you're running your city, is trying to get people to manage all the technical equipment you've got, and the facilities management. It's just difficult to find people with that skill set. So love to partner with on that, and it's a great way to give our young people an opportunity into a field that is very profitable and very rewarding. And at the end of the day, you actually can see what you've done, which a lot of us can't do in the work world. So that's just a special opportunity. So thank you for asking a great question.
Michael Barnes.
All right, first of all, yes, you guys can hear me?
Yes.
I want to say thanks for that last comment, because I've been trying to get my main panel upgraded to 200 amps, and trying to get a competent electrician to come out to your house is impossible. It's better now, but there is such a shortage of skilled workers, and you want an electrician to be a skilled worker. But moving on, I have a sort of a somewhat drawn out question about the aging of the millennials, increasing interest in single family starter homes. And are you really seeing that trend? And I can tell you, my 30-year-old son is really tired of living in apartments. So, and I will just say, let me give you my background. I kind of got tired of flying on airplanes. So for about the last 10 years, I've mostly done bike touring in California, and I've been in 42 of the 58 counties, either on foot or on cycling. And once I drove at night from Paso Robles to Salinas on Highway 101. And if you've ever done that, it's scary. There's so much of nothing out there. California is huge. It's got plenty of room to build new stuff. Yes, there's a problem with fire, but I think better building techniques in combination with better forage management could largely solve that. So my question to you is, what do you see in terms of demand for starter homes? And how can we all address that need? Because I think it's very real. And I don't want to see BTR, build to rent. That's like, I don't want to go there. So I'm curious as to what your perspective is on these issues.
It's really a great question. It's a great assessment of where we are. So I'll answer those questions. Our greatest demand right now from millennials, and millennials were being told, 10 years ago, millennials will live in a loft. They don't want to have a single family home. They want to be in the hip communities of the urban core. And that may have all been true, but now that they've started to have kids and they've lived in the urban core, which in some cities is beautiful and others needs a lot of help. The demand for our product from millennials is overwhelmingly single family detached. Secondarily, single family attached, but not necessarily out of desire, just out of price point. It's more affordable. Some do like it. Some like the idea of having a community house and a swimming pool that the community shares. But a lot of people like to have that patchy yard in the backyard. Actually, you raise another good point. So the pressure, the political pressure point with VMT, with stormwater runoff, with all the different things politically, with climate, is new urban infill. That's not what people want. And what people don't realize, when you get past 4 stories, the price of the product goes up 5 times. I'll say that again, you get past 4 stories, the price of the product goes up 5 times, primarily because you need massive amount of cement and steel. And you can think about it, you can flush a toilet on a 2nd story building. You can't flush a toilet on an 11th story building unless it's completely plumbed differently. It requires, think about when you're in a big hotel, it makes a different sound. And so, and that's part of the challenge for us is, yeah, we don't have problems building homes for millionaires, but we would like to build entry-level homes because that's what we're best at. It's what we think people need. And we do think it's what changes the community into a really positive way. So to your point on fire, there's a couple of bills, SB 55, now 1292 by Mr. Stearns, that makes it illegal to build in almost 60% of the state. It flat out prohibits it. If it could possibly burn, you can't build it. Now, we were able to stop that measure last year, but it got reintroduced last Wednesday. It's going to be heard this Wednesday. To your point about sprawl, you can call it that. We're much more politically correct, but that's the political term we deal with. Here's a number that will blow your socks off. Everybody talks about we need to do urban infill because we're just building everywhere. We have currently only built, here we go, 6.8% of the state of California is built upon. 6.8, less than 7%. We could add another, and this is a big number, but we could hit the 3.5 million number that Governor gave and not exceed 9.5% of the state's number. We could preserve 91% for farming, for parks, for green space, and add another 3.5 million units. So we believe we can build it all. We can build urban infill, we can build on the edge of urban, we can build suburban, we can build rural, and not denude the entire state, not get rid of our ag land. We're not going to get rid of our ag land by building, we're going to get rid of our ag land by not having adequate water. That's a whole new discussion. But so when we look at these bills like SB 12 by Senator McGuire, it makes it harder for us to build in these areas that could burn. Then it's going to drive urban infill, drive the price up, and drive tall buildings. Last thing I'll say to your question, your point, Michael, spot on master plan communities built since 2010, and these statistics don't come from us, they come from the state fire marshal. We have lost hardly any homes to fires. Homes built after 2010, homes built in the 50s and 60s. You look at the 25, 30,000 homes that have been burned. Those are homes that were pre-code changes in 2010. And when you look at our new master plan communities like Silverado, massive fire, 0 homes built. So if we plan right, if we work with local governments, local city and county governments, put in green field spaces, put in nice streets, put in the right types of materials that don't burn, the right roofs, Class A roofs we do, mandatorily no, the right siding, they don't burn. So I mean, that for us is how we can address the housing without necessarily, and again, people want to live in urban infill, we'll build it. But if people want to live in the suburbs, they want a single family detached, which is a demand point to the opening question, we can deliver it and still keep 90% of the state protected forever. Because 49% of it's already federally protected, 22% of it's already state protected. It is illegal to build on it today without any of these other limiting bills. So we love the state. We want it to be a beautiful place to take our kids, Yosemite, the list goes on forever. But we think we can do both. And that's why we still think there's solutions to our housing situation that makes this a great state to live and work and play.
Can I just butt in for 1 second and ask, of those 3.5 million homes that you say could be built while still preserving 91% of the state, are you talking about single family homes? Are you talking about 10-story apartment buildings? Do you have a breakdown of what percentages those are?
Primarily single family. It would also be, could be multifamily, but not 10-story buildings. No, I mean, if we're going to do what they've done in Malaysia, we need less than 0.25%, but then those are 50, 60-story buildings. And by the way, I mean, my background with the governor, I managed the whole state for him. Our biggest concern is horrible as fires are, and they are horrible. Our biggest concern for loss of life and fire is earthquake. It is not forest fires. It's all right. It's just the reality of it. It's a 10,000 people will die in 1 day. Fires will burn for months. And I mean, so when everybody says, let's go urban, for the guy who had to run disasters for Schwarzenegger, and he was all over this, it freaked us out when we saw the numbers. And those numbers, by the way, came from James Lee Witt and the Bill Clinton administration. These weren't made up by Arnold Schwarzenegger. These were made up by the Democrat president. Very thoughtful. James Lee Witt's a very, very smart guy. He's the one who mapped out all of California and came to us after he retired as a consultant and said, your biggest concern is earthquake. So we do want to build smart, mitigate for fire, mitigate for earthquake, protect. We've got a great state, a great place to live, and we think we can do it all if we can just work together to get it done.
Okay, hey, Peggy, if you don't mind, I'm going to jump in here because I would like to give an opportunity before we say goodbye to Jeff, who has given us an hour of his time, hasn't had an opportunity to say anything yet. So Jeff, did you have a message for us? Is there anything that you'd like to share?
Yeah, I mean, great conversations. I think, you know, having this group with your backgrounds and not violating any Brown Act is great. I think that the issue, the overall macro issue, just to summarize, is housing production is slowed. A lot of our guys, as Dan indicated that they're building, they're just not building in the state. So we're doing everything we can to keep them here. So when we talk about labor, it's because the labor guys, our projects are getting stopped or they're getting stalled or they're getting delayed. So they go to Texas and they go to Colorado and they go where they know they're going to be able to build master plan communities for the next 10 years. We are seeing more of a state overreach. And I think the solution is a group like yours to have more local government and the home builders at the table on these housing policies. Dan, you know, we support CBIA 100%, but a lot of it is bills are coming from, we don't know where they're coming from, and we're in defense mode. So there has to be a more stronger collaboration with local government, and it starts with communication, like the way you guys are communicating. I don't see that with the state. And so we're a local BIA, we support local control. And as the state starts to overreach more and more, Dan and I have to figure out how we have to, you know, work together, because I'm focused more on the projects. I want to get housing production done. But I'll conclude with this, but the more that the state's saying that you have to build within existing neighborhoods, then you need to take fast and affordable off the table, because to Dan's point, If you told us to build 3.5 million homes in a fast, affordable way with all types of housing, we could do it. We could do it very quickly. But telling us we have to build in existing neighborhoods and getting that big infill pushback, our builders are market driven, so they go where they can build, and they want to build here, but it's just becoming more and more cumbersome. And then on top of that, you have state laws like VMT and wildfire, green print, and there's just a stormwater, and there's all kinds of things that are just now layers upon layers. So I think the one thing I heard from this group, it would be great, is we need RHNA reform. And in RHNA reform, you got to put CEQA in the discussion. You just have to. And I would just say this, I'll conclude with this. Even if you all agreed to the RHNA numbers, we're not going to hit it because of everything I just said. So it's not just enforcing it, it's let's put some real RHNA numbers together that has local input, not a mandate. And how we're going to walk that fine line, I don't have that answer. I don't have that answer. Dan and I sleep with one eye open, but how we can support you, how BIA Southern California and my counterparts up in the North, we're all uniquely different, but we definitely want to be with local control and local government. And that's where my focus is, in concert with Dan's state focus.
Okay. All right. Well, hey, that was a nice statement. We appreciate that. And I think probably surprises a few people when you say that you support local control. We really appreciate that. And I think one of the messages, well, first I'm going to say, when we were talking statistic earlier, Dan, and you were talking about could build 6.8% and still, the 3.5 and still only be under 7%. I can't help but, I think a lot of us think about where the water comes from when we do that, but that's not your responsibility. So I just want to confirm, it sounds like, Dan, you said earlier in our discussion that you would work with us on a message to the state. And it sounds like it goes in line with what Jeff was saying as well, that we could combine our messages to send a message about what is realistic and what is not. How would we do that? Can we have a team of people that Peggy would lead and work with you both to get that message out? That would really be, I think, powerful.
Hey, I was just checking really quickly if you were able to.
Hey, Chris, you want to mute, please?
Okay, that's fine. She apparently did great.
Chris,
make sure that you guys connect this
Chris,
week.
wait, I'll get you.
Did you find out what?
I got him. Okay, go ahead. All right, so yeah.
I will do it. I will do it if Jeff promised not to mention green print.
That'll never happen.
I am dying. Thank you very much. But I'd be happy to. I apologize. I have to jump off for a family issue. But yeah, I'd be happy to work with both of you because I think we could really work together on a message.
No, I'll reach out to HCD then and work to set that up and have a dialogue there. Glad to do that, Julia. We could work with you on Peggy on that, and you can tell me who else should we go from. Kevin and Jeff and I can participate in that, as well as try to get a few people from. We have Jeff's all over the state. Jeff's uniquely qualified, but we have San Diego and North State and Bay Area too. So all of you, our view is this is, as Jeff said, we're working with locals in every springs the state. So we're glad to set up that meeting and glad to discuss it. Julie, just to get the stats, 6.8 that we built on. We don't need 3.5 million, but if we were to build 3.5 million, we could do it under 10%. It's about 9.5% of the state. So but if we were to build, let's say, another 1 million homes, because the state is so massive, you could do so with 1%, 1.5% of land, and that's why we're saying build single family, detached, or just some nice communities. So not building 50-story buildings. So our state's massive. If you fly over it, look down. There's a lot of places you won't see anything. Of course, in some big cities, you can see massive areas, and that's how you have to look at the state. You can't just look at it from the urban core.
Okay, wonderful. Well, thank you so much. I know there's a lot of other questions, and we could have gone on for another hour, but since we're out of time, we thank you both so much for coming, for sharing your message and hearing ours. And I look forward to our being able to work together in the future. Peggy, did you have a last word or are we good?
We're good. I just want to thank both of Jeff and Dan for their time on a Sunday to join us, and I think we can really work together and really shift the conversation, the paradigm in legislature. And I think it would really shock everybody if they see us working together, because they seem to want to pit us against each other. But I really think we actually have similar goals and we can really work together. So thank you both for your time, and thank you. And I will see you guys soon.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for the
Hey, and
opportunity.
one quick postscript, Jeff. No Brown Act violation. We always are very careful to make sure we don't have a majority of any council
I
or
know,
any city.
I was
So,
kidding.
We're good. All
I
right.
I was kidding. And just one quick note from me. I'm BIA SoCal. We've done a horrible job of really collaborating more with our cities. And so one of our tasks for 2022 is to do more with the local leagues or any group. So if you have a group, any group, please email me or contact me. We want us to get more involved because we're having an issue with our regional authorities. So we're getting more into the city. So the more we can do housing panels, summits, have these discussions in the open, I think that's where we have to do a better job. And so if we get a request, we're going to say yes. So just ping me if you're in Southern California.